Princess Zarathel of the Void Empire stood at the edge of her father's war room, watching holographic displays show another human victory. The small blue ships danced between her people's massive dreadnoughts like insects, but insects that stung with deadly precision. Each human vessel destroyed 3 of theirs before falling. "Impossible," muttered General Krath, his forearms crossed in frustration. "They have no sci-tech. No reality engines. Their ships run on primitive fusion and plasma. How do they keep winning?" Emperor Vextar, Zara's father, remained silent. His ancient eyes had seen the rise and fall of 100 species. The Void Empire had crushed civilizations that bent space and time to their will, yet these humans, barely 2 centuries into space travel, had stopped their advance cold. "Your Majesty," Admiral Neck spoke up. "Our scouts report something disturbing. The humans aren't just fighting us. They're enjoying it. Their pilots laugh as they die. Their soldiers sing as they charge our positions. What manner of species finds joy in hopeless battle?" Zara had wondered the same thing. She'd studied the intercepted human communications, learned their languages, watched their cultural transmissions. Humans were paradoxical. They wrote beautiful poetry about love and peace, then turned around and fought with a ferocity that made the galaxy's apex predators look timid. "They call it going down swinging," she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "It's a cultural concept. They believe that how you face death matters more than death itself. They'd rather lose gloriously than win without honor." Her father's expression darkened. "Honor? They're defending a handful of worthless mining colonies. The strategic value is negligible." "Not to them," Zara replied. "Those colonies represent their first steps into the galaxy. In human psychology, retreat from those worlds would be like admitting they don't belong among the stars. They'll fight to the last ship rather than accept that." General Krath snorted. "Then we'll give them what they want. Total annihilation." "With what?" Admiral Nex's voice was bitter. "We've lost 40% of our fleet. The humans have lost 90% of theirs, but they keep building more. Their industrial capacity is insane. They've turned their entire species into a war machine." Emperor Vextar finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of eons. "I have decided. We will offer terms." The room fell silent. The Void Empire had never offered terms to anyone. They conquered or they destroyed. "Father," Zara said carefully. "What kind of terms?" "A marriage alliance. You will wed one of their leaders. In exchange, they keep their little colonies, and we maintain face by claiming we chose to show mercy." Zara felt her heart skip. Marriage to an alien was unthinkable in their culture. Yet as she looked at the tactical displays, she saw the truth her father's advisors were missing. The humans weren't just winning through determination. They were evolving. Each battle taught them new tactics. Each loss made them stronger. "Which human?" she asked. "Their youngest fleet commander, Admiral James Chen, age 28 in their years. He's the one who's been causing us the most trouble." Zara pulled up Chen's file on her personal display. A lean man with dark hair and intense brown eyes stared back at her. His service record was extraordinary. Promoted from lieutenant to admiral in just 3 years of constant warfare, he'd never lost a battle even when outnumbered 50 to 1. "He's also," her father continued, "reportedly one of their more diplomatic leaders. He's the only human commander who's shown mercy to our surrendering forces." That surprised her. Mercy wasn't a concept the Void Empire practiced or expected from enemies. "I'll do it," she said, surprising herself. Her father nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll arrange a meeting on the neutral station at Kepler 442. The humans have already agreed in principle." As the War Council dispersed, Zara remained behind, studying Chen's image. There was something in his eyes that intrigued her. Not cruelty or mindless aggression, but a sharp intelligence combined with something she couldn't identify. Later, in her private chambers, she accessed the restricted human cultural files her intelligence service had compiled. She read about human bonding rituals, their concept of romantic love, their belief in partnership between equals. It was all so alien to her people's arranged political marriages. One file particularly caught her attention: human military traditions. She learned about something called Audie Murphy syndrome, humans who seemed ordinary until warfare revealed them as unstoppable forces of nature. Chen fit the pattern perfectly. Unremarkable background, extraordinary wartime performance. But there was something else in the files that made her pause. Humans had myths about people who could tap into primal forces when pushed to extremes. Berserkers, they called some of them. Others they called those touched by the warrior's madness. The clinical report suggested these weren't just stories. She pulled up recordings of human forces in their most desperate battles. What she saw chilled her. When facing annihilation, some humans seemed to change. They moved differently, fought with impossible skill, and survived situations that should have killed them instantly. It was like something ancient was awakening within them. The next morning, her father's diplomatic shuttle prepared for departure to the neutral station. Zara packed carefully, including ceremonial weapons from their homeworld. If she was going to marry a human warrior, she wanted to understand what kind of being she was binding herself to. During the 3-day journey, she continued studying human files. Their species had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting each other, their environment, predators, diseases, and now the galaxy itself. They'd never known peace long enough to grow soft. Your Highness, her aide Loktar interrupted her studies. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen's flagship. He wishes to speak with you before the ceremony. Zara's primary heart raced. She activated the communication array and found herself face to face with her future husband. Princess Zara Thel, Chen said, his voice surprisingly warm. I wanted to thank you for this sacrifice. I know what this marriage means in your culture and what you're giving up. She studied his face through the hologram. There was genuine respect in his expression, not the conquering arrogance she'd expected. You speak our language well, she observed. I've been studying your people since the war began. Know your enemy, as we say, though I suppose we're not enemies anymore. Something in his tone made her lean forward. What do you think of this arrangement, Admiral? Chen was quiet for a moment. I think we're both soldiers doing our duty. But maybe, if we're lucky, we can become something more than just a political solution. The transmission ended, leaving Zara with a strange sensation in her chest. Perhaps this human was more complex than she'd imagined. The neutral station at Kepler 442 was a marvel of engineering, built by the ancient architects before they vanished from the galaxy. Its crystalline corridors had witnessed the birth and death of empires, but never a wedding like this one. Zara materialized from her transport shuttle with a retinue of Void Empire dignitaries, their dark robes flowing like liquid shadow. The station's artificial gravity felt different from her homeworld. Lighter, somehow more optimistic. Human influence, perhaps. Admiral Chen was waiting in the central chamber, dressed in what her cultural briefings had identified as formal human military attire. Dark blue uniform with gold trim, chest covered in ribbons and medals. He stood at attention with 3 other humans beside him. Princess Zara Thel, he said, bowing in a way that somehow managed to show respect without submission. Welcome to neutral ground. She studied him more carefully now that they stood in the same space. He was smaller than she'd expected. Humans were generally shorter than her people. But there was something about his presence that filled the room. An intensity that made her skin tingle with unfamiliar sensations. Admiral Chen, she replied formally, I hope this ceremony will indeed bring peace between our peoples. The wedding itself was a compromise between cultures. Void Empire tradition required the exchange of ceremonial blades, while human custom demanded the speaking of vows. They would do both. As they went through the rituals, Zara found herself watching Chen's hands. They moved with the precise economy she'd seen in his ship maneuvers. Never wasted motion, everything purposeful. When he took her ceremonial blade, his fingers brushed hers, and she felt something like an electric shock. Do you, Admiral James Chen of Earth, take Princess Zara Thel as your bondmate? To share in victory and defeat, in peace and war? The neutral arbiter intoned. I do, Chen said, his eyes meeting hers directly. In human culture, she'd learned, eye contact during vows was considered essential. Do you, Princess Zara Thel of the Void Empire, take Admiral James Chen as your bondmate? To share in victory and defeat, in peace and war? She hesitated for just a moment, then spoke the words that would change everything. I do. The moment their hands touched to complete the ceremony, something extraordinary happened. Zara felt a surge of energy unlike anything in her experience. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. For just an instant she could swear she sensed Chen's thoughts, his emotions. Surprise, determination, and underneath it all, something vast and patient waiting to wake up. Chen's eyes widened, and she knew he'd felt it too. After the ceremony, They retreated to separate quarters on the station, as tradition demanded. Tomorrow they would return to human space together, beginning their new life as symbols of peace between empires. But Zara couldn't sleep. The strange energy from their bonding ceremony continued to pulse through her body. She finally gave up and made her way to the station's observation deck, where she found Chen already standing at the main viewport, staring out at the stars. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He turned to her with a rueful smile. "I keep feeling like something fundamental just changed, and I don't mean the political situation." Zara moved to stand beside him. "In my studies of human culture, I learned about something you call love at first sight. Is that what this is?" Chen considered the question seriously. "Maybe. Or maybe it's something else entirely. My grandmother used to tell stories about soul bonds, connections that transcended normal understanding. I always thought they were just stories." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching distant galaxies wheel slowly through space. Finally, Zara spoke again. "I need to tell you something about my people. We're not just conquerors. We're running from something." Chen's attention sharpened. "Running from what?" "Have you ever wondered why all the ancient civilizations in this galaxy disappeared? The architects, the shapers, the first ones? They didn't just fade away. Something destroyed them. Something that's been sleeping for millions of years." She turned to face him fully. "My father's scouts have detected signs that it's beginning to wake up. That's the real reason he agreed to this alliance. We need humanity's help against something far worse than either of our empires." Chen was quiet for a long moment. "What kind of something?" "We call them the Devourers. They exist between dimensions, feeding on reality itself. Every few million years they emerge to consume everything in their path. They're not evil in any sense we understand. They're more like a natural disaster with intelligence." "And you think they're coming back?" Zara nodded. "The signs are unmistakable. Reality distortions at the galaxy's edge, entire star systems going dark, ancient warning beacons activating after eons of silence." Chen absorbed this information with the same calm focus he'd shown during their battles. "How do we fight something like that?" "That's what my father hopes to discover. The ancient races left behind fragments of knowledge, hints that there might be a way, but it requires more than technology. It requires something they called the awakening." "Awakening of what?" Zara hesitated, then decided to trust him completely. "Power that sleeps in certain bloodlines. The ancients believed that some species, when pushed to their limits, could access forces beyond normal physics. They called it different names. The warrior's fire, the spirit that burns brighter than stars, the rage that breaks reality itself." Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "My people have legends like that too. Warriors who became something more than human when everything they loved was threatened." "Yes," Zara said excitedly. "That's exactly what the ancient texts describe. And based on what I've observed of human behavior in battle, you think we might be one of those species? I think you already are. I've seen the recordings of your most desperate battles. Some of your soldiers do things that should be impossible. Survive direct hits from plasma cannons. Dodge attacks they couldn't possibly see coming. Fight with accuracy that defies probability." Chen was quiet again, but Zara could see him thinking. Finally he spoke. "During the Battle of Proxima Station, when we were down to our last ship, I remember feeling something strange. Like the universe itself was angry at our enemies for threatening Earth. I made tactical decisions that I couldn't explain afterward. Saw patterns in enemy movements that weren't really there yet." "That's it," Zara whispered. "That's what the texts describe. The power awakens in response to absolute necessity, when fighting for something more important than yourself." They looked at each other in the starlight, both beginning to understand that their marriage was more than a political alliance. They were the first step toward something that might save or damn the entire galaxy. "So what happens now?" Chen asked. Zara took his hand, feeling that strange energy pulse between them again. "Now we go to Earth and we prepare your people for a war unlike anything they've ever imagined." As they stood together in the darkness between stars, neither of them noticed the small reality distortion that flickered at the edge of sensor range. Something vast and hungry had taken notice of their bonding, and ancient eyes were turning toward the galaxy once more. Earth's orbital defense grid powered down as Admiral Chen's flagship approached. Zara stood beside her new husband on the bridge, watching humanity's homeworld grow larger in the viewports. Blue and green and brown swirled with white clouds. It looked impossibly alive compared to the dead worlds of her empire. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Chen said softly. Every time I see it from space, I remember why we fight so hard. The bridge crew worked around them with quiet efficiency, but Zara could feel their curious glances. She was the first alien to visit Earth as anything other than an enemy, and her presence had caused quite a stir in human media. Admiral, the communications officer spoke up. We're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. They want to know if Princess Zarathel needs any special accommodations planetside. Tell them she'll be staying at my family's ranch in Colorado, Chen replied. And remind them that she's now a fleet admiral's wife, not a prisoner. Zara appreciated the subtle emphasis. Human society was different from her own in so many ways, but she was beginning to understand their concept of individual dignity. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, she was struck by how much life covered the planet's surface. Cities sprawled across continents, but between them lay vast areas of green growth. Her homeworld had been stripped bare millennia ago to fuel the Empire's expansion. Chen's family ranch sat in a valley surrounded by snow-capped mountains. The main house was built of wood and stone, materials that spoke of permanence and connection to the land. His parents, David and Margaret Chen, waited on the porch with carefully controlled expressions. Mom, Dad, Chen said as they approached. I'd like you to meet my wife, Zara. The word wife still felt strange to her, but she could see it meant something important to these people. Margaret Chen stepped forward first, studying Zara with frank curiosity. Welcome to our home, the older woman said. James has told us so much about you. Thank you for your kindness, Zara replied, using the formal phrases she'd memorized. I know this situation is unusual. David Chen, a weathered man with his son's intelligent eyes, spoke up. Unusual doesn't begin to cover it, but if ending a war means our boy gets to come home alive, we'll take unusual. Over the next few days, Zara began to understand human domestic life. The Chen family worked their land with their own hands, something unthinkable in Void Empire culture. They sat together for meals, sharing stories and arguments with equal passion. They touched each other casually, a hand on a shoulder, a brief hug, gestures of affection that required no ceremony. Most remarkably, they included her in these rituals as if she truly belonged. On the third evening, as she helped Margaret prepare dinner, the older woman asked the question Zara had been expecting. Do you love him? Zara paused in her chopping of vegetables. Your son is honorable, brave, I respect him greatly. That's not what I asked. The directness was startling. In her culture, such personal questions were never voiced so bluntly. Zara set down her knife and considered how to answer. I'm beginning to understand what love means, she said finally. My people don't typically marry for such reasons. But James makes me feel different, like I could become more than what I was raised to be. Margaret nodded approvingly. That's a good start. That night, as Zara walked alone through the ranch's fields, she felt the strange energy that had awakened during their wedding ceremony growing stronger. It seemed to respond to Earth itself, to the planet's wild vitality. She could sense life everywhere. In the soil beneath her feet, the grass reaching toward alien stars, the nocturnal creatures moving through the darkness. She found James sitting on a fence, staring up at the night sky. Couldn't sleep again? She asked. I keep thinking about what you told me, about the devourers, about the power that's supposed to awaken in some species. He turned to look at her. I've been having dreams. What kind of dreams? I see Earth burning, human colonies turning to ash, but I also see something else. People fighting back with abilities they never knew they had, moving faster than physics should allow, surviving things that should kill them, somehow bending reality just by refusing to accept defeat. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. The ancient texts mention something called prophecy dreams, visions that come to those who are beginning to awaken. James was quiet for a moment. There's something else. In the dreams, you're there too, but you look different, more powerful, like you're channeling something from the deepest parts of space. Before Zara could respond, her personal communicator chimed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, her expression growing grim. What is it? James asked. A message from my father. The first Devourer scouts have been detected at the galaxy's edge. They're moving faster than expected. She looked up at him, fear clear in her alien eyes. The invasion will begin within 1 of your years. James stood up from the fence and Zara saw something change in his posture. The relaxed rancher's son was gone, replaced by the admiral who had never lost a battle. Then we need to start preparing humanity. But not just our military, our entire species. If what you've told me is true, this war will require every human to become more than they ever imagined possible. How do we do that? James smiled, and Zara saw something new in his expression, a fierce joy that reminded her of the berserker legends from her cultural files. We do what humans do best. We push ourselves beyond every reasonable limit, and then we push further. We're going to wake up every bit of ancient power sleeping in human DNA. As if responding to his words, Zara felt the energy between them surge stronger. For just a moment, she could see beyond normal reality, perceiving the vast web of potential that connected all living things. James was glowing with it, his human life force burning brighter than should be possible. "It's starting," she whispered. "The awakening is beginning." James took her hand, and the energy between them crystallized into something new. Not just the bond between two individuals, but a bridge between species. A fusion of human determination and Void Empire knowledge that might be powerful enough to stand against the dark between stars. In the distance, coyotes howled at the moon, and Zara thought she heard something answering from the depths of space. The galaxy's long sleep was ending, and the final war was about to begin. But for the first time since learning about the Devourers, she felt hope. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting impossible odds and finding ways to win. Now they would have the chance to fight for everything that lived and breathed and dreamed under the stars. The power older than creation was stirring, and it had found champions worthy of its gifts. The United Earth Defense Council's emergency session was unlike any gathering in human history. Representatives from every nation sat alongside Void Empire ambassadors in Geneva's Great Hall, while holographic displays showed real-time data from the galaxy's edge. Admiral Chen stood before the assembly with Zara at his side, both wearing formal uniforms that symbolized their united command. The past 6 months had transformed them from reluctant, political allies into something far more powerful, a partnership that seemed to channel forces beyond normal. Understanding. The Devourer advanced scouts have consumed 17 star systems, Chen reported, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. Each system they destroy makes them stronger. At their current rate of expansion, they'll reach inhabited space within 8 months. President Martinez of the American Federation raised her hand. "Admiral, with respect, how do we know we can trust intelligence from former enemies?" Before Chen could respond, Zara stepped forward. The months on Earth had changed her appearance subtly. Her alien features remained the same, but she now carried herself with a confidence that seemed to bend light around her. "Because, Madam President, I've seen what the Devourers leave behind." The room fell silent as she activated a holographic projector. This was the Kethvar system, homeworld of my people's oldest allies. 3 billion souls reduced to cosmic dust in 6 hours. The images were horrific, planets stripped down to their cores, stars flickering and dying, reality itself seeming to fray at the edges where the Devourers had passed. "They don't conquer," Zara continued. "They don't negotiate. They consume everything. Matter, energy, the fundamental forces that hold atoms together. They are entropy given consciousness and hunger." General Harrison, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, leaned forward. "What are our options? Traditional warfare? Nuclear weapons? Antimatter?" Chen shook his head. "Conventional weapons are useless. The Devourers exist partially outside our dimension. Physical attacks pass right through them. Then how do we fight them?" demanded Representative Nakamura from the Pacific Alliance. Zara and Chen exchanged a look that spoke of long conversations and shared discoveries. Over the past months, they had been working with Earth's best scientists and the Void Empire's ancient archives, piecing together fragments of knowledge left by vanished civilizations. "We awaken," Chen said simply. "The power has always been there, sleeping in human DNA. The ability to touch the fundamental forces of reality, to bend physics through sheer force of will. Every human legend about heroes and magic contains echoes of this truth." Skeptical murmurs rippled through the assembly. Chen raised his hand for silence. "I know how it sounds, but we've already seen proof." He gestured to one of the observers in the gallery. "Captain Morrison, would you join us?" A young woman in combat uniform walked down to the speaking platform. 6 months ago, Sarah Morrison had been a routine shuttle pilot. Then her transport had been attacked by Devourer scouts while evacuating civilians from an outer colony. "Tell them what happened at Kepler Station," Chen requested, Morrison's voice was steady, but her eyes held memories of impossible things. My shuttle was damaged, life support failing. 12 wounded civilians aboard, including children. The Devourers had us surrounded. She paused, gathering herself. I should have died. We all should have died, but something inside me changed. Describe it, Zara encouraged gently. It felt like fire in my blood, like I was connected to every star in the galaxy. Suddenly I could see their attack patterns before they moved. My hands were moving the controls faster than thought. I wasn't flying the shuttle anymore. I was dancing with it through space. Morrison looked directly at the assembled leaders. I brought all 12 civilians home safely, threading through an attack pattern that should have been impossible to survive. Our computer analysis afterward showed I was moving at velocities that should have liquefied my body from the acceleration. The hall was completely silent now. She's not unique, Chen continued. We've documented similar awakenings in 37 other humans who faced desperate situations. The pattern is always the same. When fighting to protect others, when pushed beyond all reasonable limits, some humans access abilities that transcend normal physics. President Martinez spoke carefully. Are you suggesting we have superhuman soldiers? I'm suggesting, Zara said, stepping forward again, that humans have always been superhuman. You just haven't needed to know it before. Every story in your mythology about heroes who could move mountains, warriors who fought against gods and won, contains memories of what your species is truly capable of. She activated another holographic display, this one showing human figures surrounded by energy patterns that pulsed with familiar intensity. The ancient texts speak of bloodlines that carried the fire of creation, species that could channel the fundamental forces that shaped the universe. We believe humans are descendants of one such bloodline, perhaps the last one remaining in this galaxy. General Harrison frowned. If this power exists, why haven't we seen it before? Chen smiled grimly. Because you've never needed it before. The awakening only comes in response to absolute necessity, when fighting for something more important than yourself, and it seems to respond most strongly when humans face extinction-level threats. Like the Devourers, President Martinez said, understanding dawning in her voice. Exactly. We believe the invasion itself will trigger a mass awakening. The question is whether we can train people to control and channel these abilities, or whether they'll manifest randomly in the chaos of battle. Dr. Elizabeth Reed, Earth's leading physicist, stood up. Admiral Princess, what you're describing violates everything we know about physics. How is any of this possible? Zara and Chen exchanged another look, this one tinged with wonder. Over the past months, their own bond had grown stronger, their shared abilities more pronounced. Show them, Zara said quietly. Chen nodded and closed his eyes. The air around him began to shimmer with barely visible energy. Then, impossibly, he began to rise from the floor, floating freely without any technological assistance. The assembly erupted in shocked gasps and nervous chatter. Chen opened his eyes and gently settled back to the ground. Physics, he said calmly, describes how the universe usually works. But at the quantum level, reality is far stranger and more malleable than we've taught in schools. Under extreme conditions, consciousness itself can influence the probability waves that determine how energy and matter behave. Zara stepped beside him, and the energy around them both intensified. What you call magic, the ancients called science. What you call impossible, they called inevitable. The power sleeps in every human, waiting for the moment when it's needed most. President Martinez was the first to speak. What do you need from us? Everything, Chen replied. We need to identify humans with the strongest potential for awakening. We need to create training programs based on ancient techniques. We need to prepare your entire species for a war that will be fought as much with will and spirit as with weapons and tactics. And most importantly, Zara added, we need to do it all in less than 8 months. Because when the Devourers arrive, they'll expect to find a galaxy of ordinary mortals. Instead, we're going to give them a species that refuses to accept defeat, backed by power older than creation itself. As the assembly voted unanimously to support the awakening protocol, neither Chen nor Zara noticed the faint tremor in reality that rippled through the building. Far across the galaxy, ancient sensors registered the surge of energy from Earth. The Devourers had been tracking scattered awakening signatures for months, but this was something new. For the first time in millions of years, they encountered a species that might actually pose a threat. They began to move faster. The awakening centers sprung up across Earth like flowers after rain. Each facility was built according to ancient Void Empire designs, enhanced with human engineering that pushed the boundaries of both technologies. The largest center, hidden deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, had become James and Zara's second home. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood in the center's main training chamber, sweat beading on his forehead as he faced an impossible task. Before him, a solid steel block weighing 3 tons hung suspended from chains. His orders were simple. Move it without touching it. I can't do this, he said for the 10th time. It's not possible. Possible is a limitation you place on yourself, Zara replied from the observation deck. Over the past month, she had proven surprisingly gifted at awakening human potential. Your sister Emma is in the medical bay, recovering from devourer scout toxins. The doctors say she has maybe hours left. Webb's expression hardened. They had learned that emotional stakes were crucial to triggering awakening events. The cure exists, Zara continued relentlessly, but it's locked in a vault that requires massive force to open. You're the only one here. Your sister's life depends on your ability to transcend what you think is possible. Something shifted in Webb's eyes. The exhaustion and frustration was replaced by a desperate determination. He raised his hand toward the steel block, and the air around him began to shimmer with the same energy Chen had demonstrated in Geneva. The block trembled, then slowly began to move. That's it, Chen encouraged from beside Zara. Don't think about the physics. Think about Emma. Think about everyone who needs you to be more than human. The steel block swung in a wide arc, guided by Webb's outstretched hand. When he finally lowered his arm, he staggered but remained upright. Incredible, Dr. Sarah Kim whispered from her monitoring station. His brain activity spiked beyond anything we've ever recorded. It's like he was tapping directly into the quantum field. This scene was playing out in awakening centers around the world. Humans were discovering abilities that shouldn't exist. Moving objects with thought alone, perceiving enemy movements before they happened, surviving injuries that should have been instantly fatal, but not everyone could awaken, and those who did often paid a price. We're losing too many, Chen said privately to Zara as they reviewed the day's reports. 14 more psychological breaks, 6 cases of what the doctors are calling reality dissociation. The power is overwhelming them, Zara agreed grimly. My people's texts warned about this. Without proper mental discipline, accessing the deep forces can shatter a mind. They had learned to screen candidates carefully. The strongest awakenings seemed to occur in people who already had experience with extreme situations. Soldiers, emergency responders, parents protecting their children. The power responded to need and purpose, not just raw determination. There's something else, Chen continued, pulling up a classified report. Our deep space monitors are detecting massive disturbances at the galaxy's edge. The Devourer main force is moving faster than predicted. Zara studied the sensor data with growing alarm. They're not following their usual pattern. Normally, they would strip each system completely before moving on. This looks like they're racing toward something specific, Chen finished. Toward Earth. They both understood the implications. Somehow, the mass awakening events had attracted the Devourer's attention. Humanity's growing power was being perceived as a threat. We need to accelerate the program, Zara decided, even if it means higher casualties. The next morning, they implemented what they privately called the Desperation Protocol. Instead of gradual training, they began creating scenarios where awakening was literally a matter of life and death. Captain Maria Santos found herself in a simulation where her hometown was under attack by Devourer scouts. The holographic environment was so realistic that her body couldn't distinguish it from reality. When she saw her daughter trapped in a collapsing building, something fundamental broke open inside her. The building's collapse reversed itself, massive concrete blocks flowing backward through the air as if time itself was bending to her will. Temporal manipulation, Dr. Kim noted in amazement. She's actually affecting the flow of time in localized areas. Private David Kim, no relation to the doctor, awakened while facing a scenario where his unit was surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. His ability manifested as perfect tactical awareness. He could perceive every possible outcome of any decision, choosing paths through combat that led to impossible victories. Each awakening was different, but they all shared certain characteristics. The humans who successfully accessed the deep power showed enhanced physical capabilities, extraordinary reaction speeds, and what the monitoring equipment could only describe as probability manipulation, the ability to make unlikely favorable outcomes more likely to occur. It's like they're temporarily becoming main characters in reality itself, Dr. Kim observed. The universe seems to bend slightly to help them achieve their goals, but the most remarkable development came when awakened humans began working together. Chen and Zara had noticed their own abilities growing stronger in each other's presence, but when groups of awakened humans trained together, the effects were exponential. A team of 6 awakened soldiers faced a simulation of an entire Devourer invasion fleet. Working in perfect synchronization, they moved through the enemy formation like a force of nature. One soldier would create openings that another would exploit, with timing so perfect it seemed choreographed by the universe itself. They're becoming something beyond individual humans, Chen observed. A collective entity that's more than the sum of its parts. The ancient texts mention this, Zara said, excitement building in her voice. They called it the harmony of purpose. When awakened beings fight for the same cause, their abilities resonate and amplify each other. As if summoned by their discussion, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The massive screen switched to incoming transmissions from Earth's orbital defense networks. Admiral Chen, Princess Zarathel, the transmission began. This is Admiral Torres from Luna Base. We have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Preliminary analysis suggests, oh God, the transmission cut to external sensor feeds. Massive organic-looking structures were materializing near Neptune's orbit, ships the size of moons, their surfaces rippling with energy that made reality itself seem uncertain. Devourer Advance Fleet, Zara whispered. They're here early. Much earlier than we calculated. Chen was already moving toward the command center. How many awakened humans do we have ready for combat? 3,000, maybe 4, Dr. Kim replied. But Admiral, they've only been training for months. The enemy has been perfecting these abilities for millions of years. Chen stopped and turned back to face the room. His eyes held the same fierce joy that Zara had seen on the night they decided to awaken humanity's hidden power. Then we'll just have to be human about it, he said simply. We'll fight with what we have, learn as we go, and find a way to win anyway. As alerts continued to sound throughout the facility, awakened humans began gathering in the assembly areas. They moved differently now, with a fluid grace that spoke of their connection to deeper forces. Most were afraid. They had good reason to be, but their fear was mixed with something else. Purpose, unity, the absolute determination to protect everything they loved. Contact the fleet, Chen ordered. Tell them we're coming up, and signal all awakening centers worldwide. It's time to see what humanity can really do when we stop accepting limitations. Outside, the stars themselves seemed to flicker as the first Devourer scouts began probing Earth's outer defenses. The final war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. The bridge of the UES Defiance hummed with barely controlled energy as Admiral Chen's combined fleet approached the Devourer advance force. 50 human ships accompanied by 30 Void Empire vessels, a fraction of what military doctrine said they needed, but every hull they could gather on short notice. Zara stood at Chen's side, her hands moving over control systems that responded to thought as much as touch. The months of awakening had changed her too, revealing abilities that even her ancient people had forgotten. She could feel the life force of every human in the fleet, their determination burning like stars in her enhanced perception. Contact from the enemy, Lieutenant Morrison reported from the communications station. They're trying to speak with us. Put it through, Chen ordered. The main screen shimmered and resolved into something that hurt to look at directly. The Devourer representative appeared as a constantly shifting geometry of darkness and hunger, its voice echoing from dimensions beyond normal space. New awakened ones, it said, the words seeming to bypass hearing and speak directly to their minds. We acknowledge your recent ascension to awareness. You need not perish with this galaxy. Join us in the consumption and know eternal purpose. Chen stepped forward, and the energy around him intensified until the bridge lighting dimmed. We decline your offer. Something that might have been amusement rippled through the Devourer's form. You possess fragments of the ancient power, but you lack understanding. We have consumed 12 galaxies. We have faced species far more awakened than yours. All fell to entropy's final embrace. Maybe, Chen replied calmly, but they weren't human. The connection severed abruptly and the Devourer fleet began to move. The ships, and if they could be called ships, defied easy description. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in the void between dimensions, their passage leaving reality slightly damaged in their wake. All ships, prepare for combat, Chen ordered. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. Fight for everyone who can't fight for themselves. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness between worlds. Human plasma cannons and Void Empire reality disruptors struck the Devourer vessels, but the attacks passed harmlessly through their shifting forms. They're phasing in and out of our dimension, reported the tactical officer. Standard weapons can't lock onto them. But even as conventional weapons failed, something else was happening. The awakened humans throughout the fleet began to act in perfect coordination, their enhanced abilities allowing them to perceive and target the Devourers, even when they existed partially outside normal space. Captain Santos, now commanding the destroyer UES Vigilance, closed her eyes and reached out with senses beyond the physical. She could feel the Devourer ships as wounds in reality itself, dark spaces where creation was being slowly unraveled. Target the discontinuities, she broadcast to her crew. Aim for where they're weakest in our dimension. Her gunners, many of them awakened, began firing not at where the enemy ships appeared to be, but at where Santos could sense they actually were. The plasma bolt struck home, and for the first time Devourer vessels showed damage. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Human intuition enhanced by awakened abilities proved capable of tracking and targeting enemies that existed beyond normal physics. The tactical situation began to shift. Impossible, Zara whispered, monitoring the battle through her enhanced awareness. They're actually hurting them. But the Devourers adapted quickly. Their formations shifted, and suddenly space itself began to change around the human fleet. Stars flickered and died. The laws of physics became suggestions rather than certainties. Admiral, the navigation officer called out in panic. Our position keeps changing. We're moving through space, but our instruments say we're standing still. It's like they're rewriting reality around us. Chen felt something stirring deep within his consciousness. Not just his own awakened abilities, but something far older and more profound. The power that had slept in human DNA for millions of years was finally responding to ultimate necessity. All awakened personnel, he broadcast to the fleet, link your awareness with mine. We're going to show these things what humans are really capable of. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of awakened minds touched his consciousness, their combined will creating something that transcended individual capability. Through this network, Chen could perceive the battle in dimensions beyond normal space-time. He saw the Devourers as they truly were, beings of pure entropy, older than most stars, driven by a hunger that had consumed entire galactic clusters. But he also saw their weakness. They existed in the spaces between creation, feeding on the slow decay of reality itself. But humans were something different. They were creatures of stubborn creation, beings who built and dreamed and refused to accept that anything was impossible. Where the Devourers represented entropy, humans represented the fundamental force of life that built complexity from chaos. Target their foundation, Chen commanded through the mental link. They exist by consuming reality. We exist by creating it. Show them what human imagination can do when backed by cosmic power. What happened next would be recorded in the archives of every surviving civilization. The human fleet began to emit energy signatures that defied analysis. Ships moved in impossible formations, their hulls glowing with the same light that had burned in the first stars. Weapons fired beams of crystallized human will that struck the Devourers not in normal space, but in the conceptual realm where ideas became reality. Lieutenant Webb, now serving aboard the UES Determination, reached out through the mental network and somehow convinced a section of space that the Devourer ships simply didn't belong there. Reality agreed with him, and 3 enemy vessels were forcibly ejected from normal space-time. Dr. Kim, monitoring from the Defiance's science station, watched her instruments record impossible readings. They're not just fighting the enemy, she reported in amazement. They're arguing with the universe itself about what should be possible, and they're winning the argument. The battle raged across multiple dimensions. Human creativity and determination clashing against cosmic entropy. Every time the Devourers adapted a new strategy, the awakened humans found a way to counter it that shouldn't have worked but did anyway. They fight like they're myths, one Devourer commander transmitted to its fellows, as if reality itself serves their will. Because it does, Chen replied, somehow intercepting and answering the transmission. That's what you never understood about life. We don't just exist within reality, we help create it. Every thought, every dream, every stubborn refusal to give up adds to the universe's store of possibility. The Devourer advance fleet began to retreat, pulling back toward the system's edge. They had expected to face primitive aliens with fragments of awakened power. Instead, they encountered a species that seemed to rewrite the rules of existence through sheer bloody-minded determination. But as the human fleet regrouped, long-range sensors brought devastating news. The retreat was tactical, not strategic. The Devourer main fleet, thousands of vessels each the size of Earth's moon, was moving through hyperspace toward the Sol system. How long until they arrive? Chen asked. 6 hours, came the grim reply. Chen looked at Zara, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her alien eyes. They had proven that awakened humans could fight the Devourers, but not that they could win against impossible odds. Signal Earth, he ordered. Tell them it's time for the final awakening. Every human who has ever dreamed of being more than they are, this is their moment. As the transmission went out, Chen felt something stir in the depths of human collective consciousness. 8 billion people, suddenly aware that everything they had ever loved was about to be tested by the oldest darkness in the universe. The power that had built civilizations from nothing, that had turned dreamers into gods, began to wake up in earnest. Earth had never experienced anything like the Great Awakening. From Tokyo to New York, from the Amazon rainforest to the Arctic research stations, 8 billion human minds suddenly blazed with power that had slept since the dawn of their species. Sarah Martinez was teaching her kindergarten class when the awakening wave hit. One moment she was helping 5-year-old Tommy tie his shoes. The next she could perceive the fundamental mathematical structures underlying reality itself. Around her, children began to glow with soft light as their own dormant abilities stirred to life. In Mumbai, Dr. Raj Patel was performing heart surgery when he suddenly found himself able to see not just the patient's physical body, but the quantum patterns that defined life itself. His hands moved with impossible precision, guided by understanding that transcended medical training. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. A firefighter in Brazil reached into a burning building and discovered he could somehow convince the flames to part before him. A grandmother in Norway looked up at the approaching Devourer fleet and began singing lullabies that somehow strengthened Earth's magnetic field. Admiral, Chen felt each awakening through the network linking all enhanced humans. The sensation was overwhelming. Millions of minds touching the deep power simultaneously, their combined will creating ripples in the fabric of space-time itself. Admiral, Dr. Kim reported from her instruments, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from Earth's surface. It's like the entire planet has become a single awakened entity. Through the viewports of the Defiance, they could see Earth beginning to change. The blue-green world now pulsed with aurora-like patterns of light that danced between the atmosphere and space itself. The planet's gravitational field was fluctuating in complex rhythms that somehow resembled a heartbeat. The Devourer main fleet is dropping out of hyperspace, Tactical reported. Distance 1 million kilometers and closing. Estimated arrival at Earth orbit in 90 minutes. Chen studied the tactical display with enhanced senses that could perceive patterns beyond normal mathematics. The approaching fleet was vast beyond comprehension. Thousands of ships, each capable of stripping a planet down to its core. But there was something else. Something the instruments couldn't detect but his awakened awareness could sense clearly. Fear. For the first time in their millions of years of existence, the Devourers were afraid. They've never encountered anything like this, Zara said. Her voice filled with wonder as she shared his enhanced perceptions. A species that awakens collectively, that refuses to accept limitations even in the face of cosmic force. The Devourer fleet began its final approach, reality distorting around their vessels as they prepared to consume Earth's biosphere. But as they drew closer, they encountered something unprecedented: resistance from space itself. The awakened humans weren't just defending their planet, They were convincing the universe that Earth was too important to lose. 8 billion minds linked through quantum entanglement and powered by desperate love began to argue with entropy itself. On Earth's surface, 10-year-old Maria Santos, Captain Santos's daughter, visiting her mother's old school, stood in the playground and pointed at the approaching fleet. "Go away," she said with the absolute authority that only children possess. "You're not allowed to hurt my planet." The gravitational waves from her words rippled outward, somehow amplified by the planet's awakened field until they struck the Devourer vanguard like a physical blow. 3 ships were forced back, their exotic matter hulls unable to withstand the focused will of an angry child backed by cosmic power. In Beijing, 90-year-old Master Chen, no relation to the Admiral, had spent 70 years studying martial arts and meditation. As the enemy fleet approached, he began moving through ancient forms, each gesture somehow channeling the rotational energy of the planet itself. His movements created currents in space-time that confused the Devourer's navigation systems. The awakened humans weren't fighting like soldiers anymore. They were fighting like forces of nature, each one connected to the deep power in their own unique way. "All fleet elements," Admiral Chen broadcast, "prepare for the final engagement. We're going to buy Earth the time it needs to complete whatever it's doing." The human and Void Empire ships accelerated toward the Devourer fleet, their combined consciousness now so tightly linked that they moved like a single organism. Where individual ships might have been overwhelmed, the networked fleet began performing maneuvers that redefined space combat. The UES Vigilance passed completely through a Devourer vessel, Captain Santos somehow convincing local physics that 2 objects could occupy the same space without interacting. The UES Determination fired weapons that struck targets in the past, Lieutenant Webb's enhanced temporal perception allowing him to shoot at where enemy ships had been before they started evasive maneuvers. But the Devourers adapted, as they always had. Their own consciousness was vast and ancient, powered by the death of galaxies. They began to impose their vision of reality on local spacetime, creating zones where human abilities simply couldn't function. "Admiral," Zara called out urgently, "they're creating dead zones, areas where awakened power can't penetrate. If they surround Earth with enough of them," Chen understood immediately. The Devourers were trying to isolate the planet, cutting it off from the cosmic forces that powered human awakening. It was a brilliant strategy that had worked against countless other species, but they had never faced humans before. Just as the dead zones began to expand, something extraordinary happened. The children of Earth, too young to understand what was impossible, began to sing. It started in Maria's playground, spread to every school on the planet, then jumped to adults who remembered the simple faith of childhood. The song had no words that made logical sense, but it carried meaning that transcended language. It spoke of worlds yet to be born, of dreams that could become reality, of the stubborn refusal to let darkness have the final word. And somehow, impossibly, the universe listened. The dead zones flickered and failed. The Devourer ships, creatures of entropy and negation, found themselves unable to function in an environment saturated with pure creative will. For the first time in their existence, they encountered a force more fundamental than decay. "They're retreating," Dr. Kim reported in amazement. "The entire fleet is pulling back." But Chen's enhanced senses told him a different story. "No," he said grimly. "They're regrouping, preparing for something we haven't seen yet." In the depths of space, the Devourer fleet mind reached a decision that violated every principle of their existence. They would not consume this galaxy gradually. They would instead focus all their power on a single, overwhelming strike that would crack reality itself, destroying not just Earth but the entire local cluster of galaxies. It would cost them millennia of accumulated energy, but it would ensure that the human awakening could never spread to threaten their cosmic dominion. Chen felt the shift in their intentions through the quantum foam that connected all consciousness. "They're preparing for total annihilation," he broadcast to every awakened mind on Earth and in the fleet. "Everything we've ever known, ever loved, ever dreamed of building, they're going to try to erase it all at once." The response from 8 billion human souls was immediate and absolute. Let them try. What happened next would echo through the cosmic background, radiation for billions of years. Every human consciousness, from newborns to the elderly, from the awakened to those just discovering their power, linked together in a network that spanned dimensions. They reached deep into the quantum foundation of reality and made a declaration that transcended physics. Earth would not die. Humanity would not end. The dream of reaching for the stars, of building something better from the ashes of the old, was too important to let entropy win. The combined will of an entire species, backed by power older than creation, met the Devourer's annihilation wave head-on. Where the two forces collided, space-time itself buckled and reformed. New laws of physics wrote themselves into existence. Reality expanded to accommodate possibilities that had never existed before. When the cosmic storm finally cleared, the Devourer fleet was gone, not destroyed, but transformed. Their hunger for entropy had been replaced with something unprecedented, the ability to create rather than consume. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of his battered ship, holding Zara's hand as they watched Earth slowly return to normal. The planet still glowed with awakened energy, but it was gentler now, more controlled. "Is it over?" Zara asked. Chen smiled, feeling the presence of 8 billion awakened minds still connected through quantum space. Humanity had not just survived their trial by cosmic fire. They had emerged as something new. A species that could argue with the universe itself and win. "No," he said peacefully. "It's just beginning. We've got a galaxy to explore, and now we know we belong among the stars." Far across the cosmos, other species that had hidden from the Devourers for eons began to emerge from their shelters. The news spread through quantum entanglement and hyperspace transmissions. The eternal hunger had been stopped by newcomers who refused to accept that anything was young began to stir. Sensen,